Eva, this is, I was reading this story this morning and I was thinking, I can't believe they did this to a Dutch journalist. Then I saw that name. I was like, wait, I know her. I can't believe this happened. So I just want to read you back to you, the letter that you received from the British government to confirm that you actually received this. It's to you, and it says your UK visa basically has been canceled. This means you cannot travel to the UK without a visa. This is because, I'm quoting, this is because your presence in the UK is not considered to be productive to the public good. You cannot appeal this decision. Did you actually receive that letter?
I did, and relatively out of the blue too. I mean, I was going through my emails yesterday, and I saw this subject line saying that they changed something to my ETA application. I was like, what is this? I didn't apply for an ETA. I'm not, planning on traveling to the UK right now. So I just opened it and I saw this you have the email. It's a very short, simple email. And it just said, we revoked your ETA because we consider you not conducive to the public good and you have no right to appeal. Bye. That was it. And so I was like, what? What is this? And then, I started thinking, like, what could this be? Why are they sending this to me now? And then I realized that I criticized Keir Starmer a couple of days earlier on X.
Well, so I'm going to read you the quote. I think I have it in front. You described Starmer, who's the prime minister of the country, the elected official, as an evil, despicable man for allowing the ongoing rape and killing of British girls by a migrant rape gang. So
guilty as charged.
You're making a political point, an entirely defensible political point, and you believe that because you said that, you are now banned from the country.
I really don't see any other reason as to why they otherwise would have done this right now. As I said, I applied for this electronic travel authorization back in September because I went and spoke at the Unite the Kingdom rally organized by Tommy Robinson. And I spoke about remigration and the need for that. And, now because of Brexit, Europeans have to apply for an ETA, as when we go to America, we have to apply for an ESTA, right? And this was approved back in September within minutes. Like, I just got it. No problems, no questions asked. And now, out of the blue, as I said, I received that email saying they revoked it. And I'm not traveling to the United Kingdom anytime soon. I didn't book any tickets, to fly there. So the only thing that I could think about was that I said what I said about Keir Starmer. I still stand by it, by the way. Just 3 days before they informed me of that decision. So, it's really hard not to connect the dots there. And it's also very much in line with his track record. And I suppose it proves my point, that the UK is on a path to become a very unfree country where dissident voices are criticized, people are thrown in jail. And obviously, I'm not a citizen of the United Kingdom, so they can't do that to me. But this is something that they can do, apparently.
The continent is descending into darkness once again, clearly. What do you think, big picture, this tells us about what's happening in Europe and the UK specifically?
In the UK, this is the definition of a totalitarian state, right? This is the definition of a dictatorship in the sense that you are apparently not allowed to criticize its supreme leader without having your freedoms limited. And this is quite a severe limitation of my freedom in the sense that I was given no due process. I was not given a warning. I have no right to appeal. That's what it stated in the email. For the crime, quote unquote, of giving my opinion. And so that is bad. That's not a normal way for things to happen in so-called free societies. So, no matter what you think my opinions are, if they're right, wrong, radical, not radical, should it be a ground for a government to say to a woman with no criminal record whatsoever, who wants to visit a country for, just a couple of days, once a year, maybe tops, to say, no, you're not allowed, but we are going to allow thousands of illegal immigrants to cross the channel every day and enter the UK, and nobody's asking them anything. They're not asking their passports, let alone whether they're asking if they're conducive to the public good. That is that is an incredibly dystopian thing to read. Since when is being conducive to the public good a requirement to enter a country? And also, who decides that? And why do I have no right to appeal? Those are serious things in countries that claim to uphold the rule of law, that claim to be democracies. And I guess we already knew, that those were, let's say, illusions in our countries at this point. But to have it, happen to you in such a personal manner, I now realize that I cannot go and visit many of my friends. I can't go to the next rally, which is planned for May. I cannot set foot in a country that I otherwise love. I don't love the establishment, but I love the people, and I would have loved to go there again.
And of course, the UK arrests far more people every year for criticizing the British government than Putin has arrested for criticizing him, or the Saudis have arrested for criticizing MBS. I mean, it's not just repressive, it's far more repressive than countries we are told are authoritarian or totalitarian. I mean, it's worse.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And the same thing is happening on the continent in Europe, by the way. I mean, good that you bring up Russia, because I don't know. I think not many people are aware of this, but something incredible happened here just a month ago, where the European Union put out sanctions, like restrictive measures, and placed them on European citizens who they claim, and I quote, were distributing or manipulating false information. So they were saying that these citizens were destabilizing Ukraine on behalf of the Russian government. That's at least their claim, by manipulating information in the European Union. But as far as I know, Ukraine is not a member of the European Union. So why would they feel the need to protect, the stability of that nation? And second of all, those people just received, again, just like me, they just received that decision by the European Union. And what happened to them is far worse than what happened to me, because they froze their assets and they said, you are not allowed to travel. And this was a decision made by the European Council. No due process, no court order, no fair trial, nothing. So the European Union is doing that to its own citizens under the pretext of, sanctioning Russia. But these are individuals. These are people whose lives have been destroyed. And it's not getting any media attention whatsoever. But this happened just a month ago. So, there is clearly an increasing totalitarian wind blowing through this continent. And apart from this travel ban, I've also personally fallen victim to it just last year, receiving a notification from Apple saying that my phone is under mercenary spyware attack. So, you see, there is a trend here. Like, we have governments, we don't know exactly which one, or the EU, freezing assets of citizens, looking at me and you probably as we speak through this phone right now. Like, again, that is not what is supposed to happen in democratic societies, especially not when those people doing it are the ones who constantly trumpet that. So it's pretty bad over here. I'm really actually very concerned as to where this is heading.
Well, 2026 is likely to be the year that some companies will find patriotism. They'll discover it. During the Biden years, corporate America thought hating our country was the thing to do, so they did it. Now that we're in a new era, they are coming back to reality. It's not real, though. It's a trick. They don't mean it at all. Black Rifle means it, and they've been doing it since day one. They're not just discovering patriotism. They were founded on the premise. As this country celebrates 250 years of existence, Black Rifle is brewing bold American roasted beans built for people who believe in the values that made America great. So kick off 2026 with roast made for patriots, not spectators. And for the new year, Black Rifle is launching cold brew coffee cans in just black and vanilla. Powerful, smooth, and made in America. Want something even more explosive? Try Grape X or Tiger Strike. Woo! Their new zero sugar energy drinks with 200 milligrams of caffeine. That's about half the output of a nuclear power plant. But it's clean energy for Americans who mean business. Visit blackrifle.com/Tucker. Use the code Tucker for 30% off. Or find Black Rifle at Walmart, Target, Kroger, Wherever great products are sold, Black Rifle Coffee, veteran founded, America roasted. It's America's coffee. Well, I mean, that's kind of the question. Where is this going? And we're in the very infancy of AI, supercomputing, the ability of governments to actually control their populations at the level of the individual in a way that no government has ever been capable of doing. And so if you marry bad intent to increase capacity for repression, you could wind up with an open air prison camp the size of a continent very quickly.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly what is happening now to just a few individuals, but we don't know how fast this will happen to the entire continent. Maybe you guys have heard of the chat control proposal, right? That the EU wanted to enforce, which got shut down, but now they're trying it through another backdoor again. They want to basically be able to read all of our messages under the guise of preventing, child pornography, et cetera, from being spread. So they want to use, I mean, it's funny.
They're really worried about
up with the most.
Epstein's friends are really worried about child pornography. Okay.
Right. So, but AI is going to be used to do that. They are going to be scanning our messages to see if any of that material is being spread, or at least that's what they say. But it means that these unelected bureaucrats are reading all of your messages, essentially, have access to all of your messages. And I don't know when people are going to wake up to all of these pretexts, right, that are always being given. Just like Keir Starmer last week said that he wanted to ban X because of women's safety concerns, because Grok was making those bikini edits. Yeah, women's safety. But I mean, do we have to talk to the man about the Rotherham rapes and stuff? It's honestly, it's laughable, but it has real life consequences for real life people. And I think what you said about Europe turning into an open air prison is just right. That's exactly what is happening. But how do you escape that? That's the question that we all have. How do you unelect people that you've never elected in the first place? How do you get your rights back when it's just presented to you that someone has taken them away from you and they've granted themselves that power? Because that is exactly what happens here, and people feel defenseless in the face of it.
So what are the rules for speech in Europe, if we could get specific about this? Because I think it helps to understand why it's happening, who's doing it, if we understand what you're not allowed to say. So what are you not allowed to say in Europe right now?
Well, essentially, you are not allowed really to criticize the establishment. You are especially not allowed to talk about the replacement migration going on in Europe. If you say, look, we are soon, white people, the native people of Europe are soon becoming a minority in their own homelands, which is factually true. Like before the end of the century, that's the case in most European countries, even before the end of the first half of the century, actually. If you say that, they're going to slap you with a hate speech crime. They're going to say that is hateful language, inflicting racial hatred, etc. So that seems to be the common denominator, especially talking about immigration and the effects of that, linking it to crime, which is obvious. You only need your two eyes to know that is the case. That's something that really seems to bother them.
So who is them? I mean, why? So clearly there is a very well organized, very well funded effort to eliminate the white population of Europe. I mean, because it is being eliminated and you're not allowed to notice it. You'll be punished by police and courts you pay for if you notice what's happening to your ancestors' homeland. So that's all just true. Yeah.
That's right.
Like, who is pushing this?
It's the question of all questions, right? But it seems that all of these leaders that we have, be it Keir Starmer, be it Ursula von der Leyen, be it Merz in Germany, be it Macron, they all follow the same playbook. They all say the same things, literally post the same things, in their communications to the outside world. They might focus on slightly different subjects here and there, but the agenda is the same everywhere. And it's the erosion, essentially, of our borders, of our nation states, of our heritages. Right. I don't have to tell you or your audience that. We all know it. The question is, who's behind it? Honestly, I don't know. I can't answer that question. But what I can tell you is that the people who are rolling out these agendas are doing it out in the open. in front of our faces, and they keep getting re-elected. So I have made it my mission, at least, to talk about those people and target them specifically, because they are the ones that are in front of us, rolling this out over and over and over again. But it's very difficult to say.
So I don't know that much about Merz. I don't know Macron. His reputation is smart, is clever, and cunning, skilled politically. But I know a fair amount about Keir Starmer, and you will never convince me, at gunpoint even, that Keir Starmer is making independent decisions about the future of Britain. Just, you can't convince me of that. He's not adequate as a leader of a nation. He just doesn't have the basic qualities. He is taking orders. That could not be clearer, and I think it's clear to the British population. But you don't know who's giving those orders.
No, I mean, I don't know who's given those orders. I think if we would know, it would be easier to stop this from happening, right? But that is, I think, part of the agenda, is that we don't exactly quite know who's behind this. Of course, we're fighting a very bureaucratic system also in Europe. There are, in the European Union, like tons of high government officials whom we don't even know by name, yet have billions and billions of euros at their disposal to roll out an agenda that goes against our interests, that literally wants to replace us, is crumbling our economy, and is essentially just destroying this continent. So, I mean, I've heard people say before that this is all part of fifth generation warfare, that it's part of the game, that you don't know exactly who your enemy is. And I think they want to keep it that way. But once again, it doesn't stop us from saying these people that we do see on television every day are bad, they're evil.
Yes, that's correct.
And we need them out of office, because that gives people at least, some sort of action that they can take, even though already that is difficult. And that's something that I hate to say, but in Europe, the majority still of your average Dutchman, your average Frenchman, is not even aware of that. So we have a lot of work to do in that respect.
I think you make a really wise point. It doesn't matter whether they're the prison guard or the warden. They're still participating in an indefensible system, hurting and killing people, and that's evil. So, I guess that's all we really need to know. But it is frustrating when you see a coordinated effort like the one underway to eliminate white people. It's the biggest thing that's happened
and especially
in our lifetimes.
If you can't speak about it. Right. Yeah, it's the biggest thing that's happened in our lifetime. And especially if you can't speak about it without running the risk of being thrown in jail. Right. Might I add that to what I just told you, right? And let's say in addition to the answers that I'm giving you here, is that we in Europe run the risk of being thrown in jail when we talk about this too liberally. I want the American audience to understand that there are certain things that we really cannot say. So, that is very different. There is no First Amendment here, and we definitely do not have a Second Amendment to support it. So that makes our situation, considerably different, especially for political commentators, journalists.
Yes.
It is really more challenging, let's say, especially when you have a family that you want to protect as well.
It seems to me the final piece of the control grid would be digital currencies, because at that point, of course, they can starve you to death if you get out of line.
Yes.
How long before that arrives?
Not long. The European Union is working on their digital euro, has been for a while, and I think they're planning to roll it out this year, actually, or maybe beginning of 2027. So once that hits, same story, of course. They say that it's all voluntary, that you don't have to use it, but it's just a matter of time till they do. We see through the stories. But yes, that is, of course, going to be the final instrument that they can use to control the entire population. But as I said, they're already freezing the bank accounts of people who they deem to be benefiting Russia, right? With giving their opinion, journalists who are writing about their opinions concerning the conflict. So they don't necessarily need CBDCs to do incredibly unlawful things and say that they do it in order to protect stability and democracy.
For years, you've been told this is not happening, and you're a bigot for thinking it is, but it is happening. Mass migration is reshaping the West completely. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's a fact. Different people live here now. You're not a racist for noticing that. You're just using your senses. Again, it's not a theory. It's the biggest fact of this or any generation in 1,000 years. The replacement is real. European governments aren't just tolerating mass migration, they're encouraging it. They're funding it. They hate their populations and they want new populations. We've got a new documentary on this called Replacing Europe, Following the World's Deadliest Migration Route. Our filmmakers follow what nobody wants you to see. They spoke directly with migrants, locals, officials who admit what the public is never told. It's not ideological, it's reality. This is happening, it's destroying the West, and our cameras caught it. Replacing Europe. That's the doc, only on TCN now. You live there, so you have a better sense than I do, but how far from some kind of revolution would you say European populations are? Are people do they understand what's happening? Do they care? Is there any meaningful pushback on a mass scale?
I think we need to have all eyes on Germany. I think what is going to happen there with the elections, whether AfD is going to end up becoming the biggest party, that is going to make a huge difference in terms of our future. When we're talking revolution or uproar, I can't even really talk about revolution because before I know it, you would have a police officer standing in front of your door saying that you are inciting that. So, I'm not, for the record. I really don't know whether we're there yet. I think that is part of the problem, is that there are still large parts of the population in Europe that is just not aware, especially if they're not on X, if they're not following alternative media. I don't mean to say that Fox News is a very truth-telling right-wing news channel, but we don't even have anything like that, not even close to that in, let's say, the Netherlands, where I'm from. The mainstream media is just left-wing. So if that is what you're consuming all day, every day, you don't see a problem in this. You don't see that people are being thrown in jail in the UK for expressing their opinions. Like, those types of news stories just don't reach a large part of the population. So I don't know if we're close to that yet. I do think that there is a big sentiment that is growing that this cannot go on the way that it has. That the European Union especially has taken too much power, has granted itself too much power. And I do feel that they're going to be cracks, let's say, in that foundation in the next couple of years. But who knows, Tucker? I don't know if it's going to be fast enough. Like when we're looking at our demographic change, at a certain point, when you become totally outnumbered, you become minorities. I don't want to say it's over because it's never over. But it's going to be very difficult for us to reverse that.
Yeah, I believe that. Keep in mind, though, that the UK voted to leave the European Union 10 years ago in 2016, Brexit. And it's more repressive than it's ever been. And it does seem more in line with, more in coordination with the EU than it was 10 years ago. So you sort of wonder, like, maybe there are deeper forces at work here than just the horrible anti-human bureaucracy in Brussels.
Yeah, exactly. I think that is a really good argument to say that there is a more sinister global agenda going on here.
Yeah.
Same thing in my country, back in the Netherlands. We keep on electing people that, destroy our country. And I really don't know who votes for them. I honestly wonder, when you talk to people on the streets, they're not saying that they want those things. They're not saying that they want replacement migration. They're not saying that they want a digital euro. Nobody's saying those things yet. They're constantly being pushed down our throats, all of those agenda points. So yeah, I agree with you. It's too much in sync everywhere to not see that pattern.
Of course. And in the United States, you're seeing everywhere signs of spiritual renewal, Christian religious revival. Are you sensing that in Europe since you live there?
Not nearly as much as I would like to. No. Europe is a highly, highly secularized continent, especially Northwestern Europe. Also, for context, it was like when I started doing commentary for a more American audience, I noticed and involved myself more in American politics. I really noticed how often people talk about their faith in God, how often he is mentioned, and how often they speak about Jesus also in political discourse. Now, you can have your opinions about that, whether it's always genuine or not, but he's mentioned. Here,
Yes.
if you do that in Europe, you get ridiculed. You get ridiculed. People will look at you funny. I grew up in a country where if you said you were a Christian, people would immediately say, "How is that possible? Don't you have a university education? Like, that's so stupid. Like, how come that you believe in a fairy tale?" That is like the status quo in my country, and I think that also explains why we've gone down the deep end as far as we have, because people don't recognize even, they don't recognize the idea or the concept of good and evil. So if you don't see that, if you don't believe that God exists, if you don't believe that good exists, then you don't believe that evil exists. And so you will just always write it off as incompetence at best. Or you'll say, no, that's just a different viewpoint, or everything is relative. And that's exactly what has gotten us, what has gotten us where we are today.
Yeah, I was about to ask, like, how's that worked out for the Netherlands? Pretty well, pretty great. Mocking God, like
Yeah,
good long-term strategy.
Exactly. I mean, the country is on a great path, isn't it? So, and indeed, really, really bad long-term strategy, but also really, really bad short-term strategy, because people aren't happy. Young people aren't fulfilled. They don't know what to do with their lives. They lack purpose. They lack meaning. Of course you do. So it's both bad in the long run and in the short run. But it's very much the case. I mean, I converted to Catholicism a couple of years ago personally, in the UK, by the way, where I now can't go. Yeah, great. But only 2.7%, for example, of the Dutch population is a practicing Catholic. And in the Netherlands, it's half-half. You have like 50% is in name, at least, is Protestant, 50% is Catholic. And only 2.7% is practicing. That tells you, the situation of my homeland.
So my last question is about you. You live in Europe. You have a family in Europe. You are European. Can you stay? Do you plan to stay?
I have to stay. This is my home. I'm Dutch. I'm married to an Italian. Our young boy, he's 13 months old now. He's both, obviously. This is my home. Unless I don't want to spend my days in a prison cell, because I will be good to no one, and I'm genuinely fearful that is where we are heading. That's what they will do to people like me, who voice the things that I think. But as long as I have, I will do everything in my power to avoid that from happening, because I really do still have hope. I really do think that we should all have hope, even though it looks bleak for us. Because if you lose the hope, there's no point in fighting. And that's the last thing that I want, because I think it's the first thing that our establishment wants, is for people here to become demoralized, to say things like, oh, it's just over for Europe. There's no future for us. If you're white, you should just go. It's like, no, these are the lands of our ancestors, and they should be the lands also of our children. That is, if that's worth fighting for, I would say.
Eva Vlaardingerbroek, thank you, and Godspeed.
Thank you, Tucker.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Things around the world are moving so fast right now, it's impossible to keep up with all of the changes. But we do know that when those changes happen, markets change too. And nothing changes faster than the price of precious metals, gold and silver. It just shifts in an instant because it is a reaction to and against what's happening in the world. So timing is essential. If you're thinking about adding precious metals, and you definitely should, we do, you need to know when prices are going to move and why they're moving. And Battalion Metals makes that all really simple. You can buy the dip when it happens. Try calling your broker in the public equities market. No, this is a new world, and Battalion makes it a transparent and honest world. There's no fraud here at all. We were founded to fight fraud. So if you want real-time alerts sent directly to your inbox when gold and silver prices move, go to battalionmetals.com/alerts. Markets move fast, stay ahead of them. So it's battalionmetals.com/alerts.